We're live. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Awesome. Thank you for having me here. I've been a long time listener.
I'm so excited. Let me just quickly. Oh my God, why is this not? Okay, sorry. Just like one technical bug. So this episode is brought to you by Vervin. If you're a GP or LP looking to simplify capital raising and deployment process, Vervin is here to help. Trusted by over 800 funds managing more than $2 billion in transaction, Vervin offers a secure, streamlined payment platform designed specifically for private capital markets. Say goodbye to manual reconciliation and repeated follow-ups. Raise and deploy capital faster and with greater transparency. Ready to make your fund operation smoother? Visit vervine.com and see how easy it can be. Also, use our bit.ly link down below. Okay, so to start the show, I want to let the audience get to know you a little bit more. So, Stephen, you have been flying under the radar for a while, and recently there's like a huge Fortune article came out that you started a new fund. Why don't we start with your background on your beginning with like your parents' shop and like how it inspired you to become an investor and then started Seven Stars.
Yeah, so I think my journey, definitely starts from my parents. So they came and immigrated from South Korea to Los Angeles, California, in the late '80s, and then they started a small business called Seven Star Fashion in downtown LA. So they were the first entrepreneurs that I knew. They worked incredibly hard, a lot of long hours, classic immigrant journey. We grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood, and so definitely saw like all their sacrifices to help me get to where I am today. And I would say for me, my passion for technology started in high school. So I grew up on the east side of LA, and then I got accepted to a private school on the west side of LA that was kind of down the street from UCLA. And I was really fortunate to receive a full scholarship to go to this school because my parents couldn't afford the tuition. But that also meant that it took them about an hour and a half every day to pick me up and drop me off right at school. And so that gave me a lot of free time. I was always the last kid to be picked up at school. Always had kind of a lot of free time, as I mentioned. So I started reading about the technology industry then, and that was also kind of the start of the mobile ecosystem. The iPhone had come out when I was in high school. I read a lot about the New York tech ecosystem that was growing pretty rapidly. Companies like AppNexus, MongoDB, Tumblr, and then that really piqued my interest. And so I ended up applying to NYU and thankfully got in. And I wanted to see it myself, right, and live in New York. And so that's kind of what led me to college in New York. And then I would say my journey to Silicon Valley kind of started my junior year of college. And so quickly I realized that I wanted to be in Silicon Valley and build a network here and kind of receive the training ground. But I had three forces working against me. So one was my parents, as I mentioned, they didn't really grow up in a Fortune 500 company or corporate America. And so I didn't really know anybody. I didn't have any mentors or anyone in the tech industry. The second thing was I went to a school that, a lot of tech companies kind of, skipped or looked over, right? And then lastly, I was an econ major. So if I were to do it all over again, I probably would be a CS or engineering, right? So you kind of have three things working against me. So I just did the only thing that I thought would work was, I cold emailed over 1,100 people, most of my junior and back half of kind of that time. And then also pretty much my entire senior year. And so I just emailed, anyone and everyone from large companies to small companies, people who went to NYU, people who didn't, to just try to break in as a non-technical, business major. And then I was really lucky enough to get in front of Twitter. And at that time, Twitter was hiring an intern to focus on the revenue analytics side. And I ended up getting this role. So I would say that was not only how I got into Silicon Valley, but also like the biggest risk that I took in my career, which was, a lot of my friends, family members, professors, they all said, hey, you shouldn't take an internship after you graduate college, right? You have to get a full-time job. But I felt like getting kind of one foot in the door at Twitter and breaking in was going to make the difference. And so that's kind of how it got here, 12 years ago now. And luckily, about a couple months into my internship at Twitter, they asked me to stay full time, and that ended up being the first 4 years of my career. So, a lot of luck and people helped me along the way, and then later on helped me get into venture, which I know we'll talk about kind of later on.
For sure. I wonder, maybe we could start with the most recent like job you had before you started Seven Stars.
Perfect.
What I feel like SV Angel has been like such an iconic firm. It has to invest in like some of the most like well-known companies like a Google or OpenAI. Like, why don't we talk about what were some core lessons that you've learned there being a partner, and then maybe we could start. Or we could talk about like how it trains you from like sourcing to diligencing to like winning the deal, like what you kind of like brought to Seven Stars today.
Yeah, there were, I would say, two lessons that I learned during my time at SV Angel. And so one was you have to do all the little things right and have that kind of consistency day to day. And I know it sounds so simple and obvious to a lot of the listeners, but that's kind of 90% of the job, right? Which is making sure you show up to every founder meeting on time, prepared, have notes, have the right questions.
Mhm,
I think a lot of times this job can be very hectic, right? You have a lot of things that you're juggling and a lot of things going on, but you have to make sure to get the basics right and always understand that founders are our customers, right? We're all here because of the incredible innovation that the founders are working on, and so it sounds so easy and simple, but that was a really important lesson. Just you have to show up every day and bring that.
mhm,
And then the other lesson I learned was, always being kind of back to the first part, always being founder first. So making sure you always have the founder's interest in mind and being supportive to them, not just like from a company perspective, but also personally as well, right?
mhm,
Founders are human. They're going through a lot of things outside of the workplace as well. So being that first call and being somebody who they can rely on is really important, a part of being an investor.
I wonder. So since like you guys have invested in like a lot of like real, like when I was like looking at your portfolio, I wouldn't name names, but I feel like there's so many really top AI companies. Why don't we talk about like from a sourcing perspective? Is there any like strategy that you find really helpful for you? And then same as like winning, since like nowadays like you started your own firm and then you are competing with many like major firms as well, and how do you kind of like win the deals?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start from the second question and work backwards. So, as some of your listeners may know, I started Seven Stars earlier this year. So it's a $40 million pre-seed seed stage firm
Mhm,
that partners with founders building enduring AI companies across both consumer and enterprise technology.
mhm,
And and for me, a big part of why I wanted to be a founder was because of the unique insights that I learned from being not just a venture capitalist, but also being an operator at Twitter. And
mhm,
so for me, my intention is to bring a really unique value prop to founders. Um, I think first part is helping a lot with hands-on fundraising coaching. So I've helped hundreds of founders over the years raise north of $1 billion in capital. And so I've kind of seen it all in terms of fundraises from the start to the very end, and I've helped companies raise from virtually every single major investor in the world. And then the second part is, kind of witnessing and being involved with a lot of the companies, the early innings of AI.
mhm,
I've built my own advisory network of folks who still help my companies today with challenging problems, advice, company building. These are operators and executives and researchers from some of the top AI companies like OpenAI, Meta, NVIDIA, Nubank, and many others. And so just, over the weekend, one of those folks, was helping one of our companies with a really challenging problem. And so that's happening kind of 7 days a week. And then lastly, it's around hiring, right? I think if not, all venture capitalists help with companies hire. But it's not just like the first 10 employees. I think the mid-level to senior level executives, and as the company scales, it is just as important. And so for a lot of the founders I work with, they're first-time founders, right? They've never run a company before. And so a lot of these folks kind of, as the company scales rapidly, they have to learn how to find these people, how to close them. And then on top of it, how do you manage and build a team with people who might have 10 or 20 more years of experience than you. That's a very challenging thing, and that's a muscle you build over time. And so when you put all that together with, with my strategy, I'm hoping, and it seems like that's why founders want to work with me and work with the Seven Stars team. And lastly, my model is to be a co-investor, not leading, not taking board seats. And so I can work collaboratively with everyone in the ecosystem. Some investors might have specific check size requirements. They might have specific ownership requirements. But for our fund, we just want to work with the best founders in the world and help them achieve their mission. So I would say that's like the your last question. And then, yeah, I think in terms of kind of, thinking through some of the kind of the great companies and the lessons and all that learned along the way, it just goes back to the team, right? I know everyone says that, and it's, it is really a people business. But I'm looking for founders who have demonstrated resilience, not just over their career, but throughout their life. So I connect with a lot of founders who have an immigrant background like myself. Even when if their parents or family members immigrated here, because that's a really hard thing to do, right? And that's like one of the best kind of indicators of someone who is resilient. And so that's really important because companies are hard, right? There's so many ups and downs along the way, even when you look at the iconic companies of yesterday and today. And so that's something that's a skill set that you can't just go by, right? That's something that you have to live through and learn. So I'd say that's one of the most important things. It's not the most important thing. And then I would say the second thing is, you have to be amazing at building teams, and you have to be a talent magnet. As a founder of a company, especially at the pre-seed and seed stage where I invest in, a lot of times, like, you're trying to convince people who have higher paying jobs. They're working at these large tech companies that are established, right? And you have to convince this person or these people to join your mission, right? Get a pay cut, right? Join a company that no one's heard of. You might be one of 6 companies in the space with an incumbent that is kind of dominating right now. But you have to show them your vision, and you have to convince them of why they should take a bet on you and the company. That's very hard to do. Not everyone can do it, and that also starts with, like, when you're in high school or college or other companies you worked at. So I'd like to see, like, are you somebody that people want to follow as a leader? And when you put all that together in the right market, with a bit of luck, that's how you can build a really amazing company.
I wonder, so like at the beginning, I guess, like, can you walk us through, like, for example, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but, like, for example, finding any of your portfolio company, like, what are, at the beginning, were they like the hot company everyone's chasing, or were they more towards, like, since they're like earlier stage, so like people are not really paying attention to, but like you saw something in them? I wonder, would you say it's like more towards like a winning game, or would you say it's more towards like a sourcing or like deal quantity kind of game at the beginning for like building a good, yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit of both. There have been companies that I've been really fortunate to work with where there were lots of different offers on the table, and the founders were oversubscribed, and
Mhm.
it was very competitive. And then there have been companies where I was fortunate to be the first believer, or there wasn't as much interest, or a lot of times the round took a while to close, and so I tried my best alongside other investors to help out. And so I would say it ranges. I think if you even look at like some of the best companies of all time, there's a mix of both, right? So I wouldn't say it kind of leans one towards the other. And I would say for me, when I first started in venture, so I've been at 3 firms: Correlation Ventures, Bain Capital Ventures, and SV Angel. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of lessons learned. But one of the first things that I did at Correlation was I really worked on building my network with both founders and VCs. So I would say, like, my first few weeks there, one of the first things I did was I looked at the Forbes Midas list, and it has the rankings of the best venture capitalists in the world, these legends. And I said, Well, I just started a venture. I don't think anyone's going to have time to meet with me. So I'm going to focus on meeting folks who work for these legendary partners because I think that one day some of those folks are going to be running these firms. They're going to be the senior leaders at these firms. And if I believe that I can have a long career in venture, that's those are relationships worth pursuing. And so I kind of set out and did that, and so lots of coffee chats, lunches, dinners, and the great thing is that when I look at kind of 9 years later today, some of my closest friends in venture and just in life in general are folks that I met when they were associates and principals and venture partners and junior partners, and now they are senior leaders at their firms. And so the reason I bring this story up is that one of the companies that I've worked closely with is a company called Skild AI. And so, Skild AI is building, general purpose robotic intelligence, backed by, some amazing investors. I was really fortunate to meet Deepak and Abhinav, the co-founders of the company, through a really close friend, Ravi Raj Jain, who's a general partner at Lightspeed. And Ravi Raj was one of those folks I met early on in my venture career. And when he was leading the seed round, he thought of me and felt like it could be a great fit. So was graciously kind enough to make that introduction. And the company has grown really rapidly since since the investment only a few years ago. I think that's just kind of one example, right? That these networks matter. Sourcing is just as important, if not more important than kind of winning.
I wonder, so like, how do you make sure that people want to share a deal with you? Or like, I guess like for the deal, do you ask for an intro or does like, for example, if and so mentioned about deal, you would like write it down and then pursue it on your own? Can you elaborate more about like the process of like, for you to like, um, I guess that filtering out like the amount of deal that you probably hear from like all the dinners or coffees. I'm sure like you would hear like maybe 40 deals per week. How do you kind of like quickly filter down to like which one to pursue? And how do you make sure that like the people who are I guess like people who are sharing with you, would you say, do you have like a cadence on like, okay, so on Monday I share like 20 top deals and then on Tuesday I receive 20 top deals? Like how do you kind of like think about the funnel or the processes for you to like code, like I guess like constantly winning these like top AI companies?
Yeah, I think about it, like everything in life, these are long-term relationships. So I try not to think about like the number or, being transactional, being like, hey, like here's my deal, or so, you got to share yours kind of thing. I think a lot of this is also very organic as well. And so in terms of kind of how I meet, a lot of interesting companies today, it's really from my founder and VC network. And so, I really respect kind of not just founders I back, but, founders I know in the ecosystem. Anytime they, introduce me to a company or they even say, hey, this is a person who's worth tracking, who might be a founder down the line. My ears perk up and then I start doing research. That's a really important source for me. And then in terms of VCs, it's really relationship driven. And then I also like to meet folks regularly to kind of remind them of my value proposition. What are some interesting trends and things I'm looking at or things that I'm interested in learning. And then also, if there are companies in my portfolio that I'm helping raise the next round, that's also a very relevant topic as well. So kind of all this it's not, I wish it was a little bit more formulaic, but a lot of it is, as I said, organic and sometimes there might be more companies where I'm helping these founders fundraise, right? So maybe I'm not as much kind of investing in new companies, and then there might be times where it's not as hectic on the portfolio company management side, and then I'm trying to meet more founders and more interesting kind of topics.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how we do it. And I think for some of my closest friends in the venture industry, it's not just every week. I probably talk to them every day, every other day, weekends, right? Just even when I have a thought in my mind, I'm like, hey, this is a really interesting company or space. Have you seen anything like it, or how should I think about it? So I really enjoy the collaborative nature of it all.
I wonder, since like I feel like I don't like, okay, so since like you don't you may not want to name, but I will just like shout out to some of the companies that you've been involved with, which is like, ElevenLabs or like Mercor or like, to OpenAI. Like obviously we're probably not going to talk to them in like extent, but like I guess like they're all like the top names in venture. So like what are something that you've learned from like spotting these companies early on, and do they actually have like really, oh by the way, oh hi Lucky, so like do they actually have really core like characteristic that you feel like helping them stand out beyond maybe some of them are like second time founders, or like people have certain like domain expertise, but like I guess like how do you quickly filter out these companies beyond like all these other companies who are doing the similar ish things?
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of people kind of call venture, more art than science, and it's a very humbling job. You get it wrong a lot, right? There's lots of companies I've met where I didn't have the right point of view, and later on they became wildly successful. So it's probably going to happen more in the future. Has happened in the past, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, and so in terms of like founder profile, I I've had a great fortune to work with founders who are first time founders, right? And I've also worked with like repeat entrepreneurs. The first company that I invested in out of 7 stars, which is still in stealth, is a third time founder. And he's a founder I worked with really closely at SV Angel for his second company. And now he's back for his third. And so, um, yeah, haven't really seen any kind of consistent patterns there. Um, I would say it goes back to kind of learning more about their resilience. And it's as I mentioned before, it's so hard to start a company. The odds are always against you, right? There's so many things that have to go right, and so half the battle is continuing on, right? Even during kind of those low moments, or even when you feel like, hey, there's this like thing that I can control, or this big incumbent, or other startups are copying my idea, or whatever it is. You have to kind of keep pushing through.
Mhm.
And so some of that is, you can, even before you meet the founder, you can read about them. The great thing about kind of the world today is that there's so many great podcasts like yours where, even if I've never met the founder, I can watch like a quick snippet or watch an interview or read something that they've written on Twitter and have a quick sense of kind of their personality to some extent. So I think that helps a lot. And then, talent magnet, that's a really important thing. A lot of that you can see through people that they've hired at their previous companies, right? And so a lot of times, I'm backing founders where there's no website, right? There's nothing about them. Maybe I've heard great things about them. And so, I think for listeners, our question might be, how do you know, right? They haven't hired anyone yet, or maybe it's just the 2 or 3 co-founders. But you can look at the people they've worked at in the past. And so, Skild AI, for example, Deepak and Abhinav were professors at Carnegie Mellon. All right,
Mhm.
they published some of the groundbreaking robotics papers and research reports
Mhm.
throughout the years. And when you look at the people who've collaborated with them, they're former students and mentees, right? Who've ended up going to some of the biggest labs or universities. You
Mhm.
can start picking up patterns, right? Of how where and how people and who they surround themselves with. So yeah, I would say those two things are it's probably common with a lot of the companies I've worked with that have gone on to be successful.
For sure. I want to double check, like I want to double click on like one of the part you mentioned, which is like, for example, these like researcher turned founders. I feel like there's a lot of companies coming out of like research labs these days,
Yes.
because of like we're in the era that like AI is like changing a lot of like how things function these days. But like, how do you evaluate their ability to commercialize something? So like I've seen a lot of like, even like from my friends or like companies that I have like invested in, I feel like a good researcher is like just one part of the game, or like a talent magnet. They may be able to attract a lot of like amazing technical talent, but are they able to go to market? It's like a second kind of like question. But how do you think about the commercialized commercializability at the very beginning from like the seed stage. Obviously, every Skilled AI, there is like 400 companies that probably didn't make it. How do you think about like, how do you take into consideration that like maybe the founder may not be like the top salesperson in their category, like, but they are the top researcher? Like, would you back them, or would you pick the one that who can sell better, but like maybe their research ability is like not as good as like some of these other people? Like I said, what do you think matters?
Yeah, I think it's kind of your learning slope, and a lot of that is reflected kind of early on, right, in the company, or just even when you have like the first conversation with the founder.
Mhm,
um, how fast they pick up on things.
mhm,
Are they curious? Are they asking the right questions? That also shows, you can also see a bit of their hustle too. So a lot of these researcher turned founders,
mhm,
some of the best folks I've worked with are incredibly curious, and they're, will just go and like cold email and cold call people to try to learn as much knowledge as possible, and then also bring on advisors or people kind of, in their circle who can help and coach them, because they want to learn as much as possible quickly.
mhm,
Um, and so I think those are some of the things kind of I'm looking for as well. If I have a first conversation with the founder, and there's something that we talk about, and maybe, you don't have to have all the answers, right? And in kind of day one, but then the second time I talk to them, or as they're thinking about leaving to officially start the company, and you can just pick up so quickly on like, hey, how much have they learned? Like,
mhm,
what are their insights, right? And maybe those insights have matured, and and they have these like really specific kind of things that they want to do for like the first 6 months of the company. Those are clear signals, right? That they can be world class leaders. And sometimes it is hard because it doesn't show up quickly, right? It takes people time to learn, and to make mistakes, and to try different business models, or things. But I think that is like the start of it, right? If you don't have that, and you're not attracting and having the right people around you, or helping you think through, and make the best decisions for the company, I think it's tough, right?
mhm.
So that's kind of what I look for, and it comes in a variety of different ways.
I wonder, so like since like you at the beginning you mentioned that like you guys are working collaboratively, you don't lead, primarily follow or like co-invest. I wonder, what does your portfolio construction look like? Maybe we could start with like your check size and then how many companies you invest in.
Yeah, so I tend to invest in about 35 to 45 companies
Mhm,
in Fund One,
mhm,
and it's pretty consistent with, how I've invested over the years. My check size ranges from 250 to 500K, and so pretty wide range, in terms of kind of check size.
mhm,
And for me, it's to really be flexible and to work with the best founders in the world. And you know, in terms of like kind of the portfolio construction, as I mentioned, I'm focused on both consumer and enterprise AI application companies. So I know there are a lot of investors who have a really specific point of view about the world, or thesis, right? And they say, hey, like these are the three things, and these are the only three things I'm going to look at. But I've tried to stay really open minded across my career. For some of the great companies, it's been kind of all over the place, right? In
mhm,
terms of sector, right? Productivity, collaboration, to robotics, to consumer technology, to marketplace. So um, you have to have kind of that mindset, right? You just never know where the next big company is going to come from,
mhm,
and so I try to keep it that way. Um, and yeah, I would say like even when I think about some of the companies I've invested in so far, I've invested in 9 companies now out of 7 stars since
mhm,
closing the fund in March. I was been really fortunate to back a stealth company building AI agents for law enforcement agencies and groups. And that's an example of a company where, I'm probably not the expert in it, but
mhm,
I got up to speed really quickly. And the reason why, I got really excited to partner with the two founders was, first of all, like their incredible resilience, just kind of throughout their careers or lives. How both of them kind of grew up in their organizations, and then later became senior leaders, and had people, lots of people reporting to them. And and really important kind of parts of the business that they were responsible for. They also had like the right insight in terms of like why is it important for AI to do what it does today. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have now. And when you look at kind of what they're trying to solve, for a lot of these law enforcement agencies, they have lots of data, right?
Mhm.
Cell calls, audio, text, video, images, right? All these things that they have during kind of these cases. And because it's really hard to go through like one by one. Some of these cases have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of files. They have to pick and choose which ones they have to work on. But what if you use this technology and now you can go after every case and go after every bad person doing bad things, right? That's really important for society, right? And so yeah, I think that's an example of a company or where it wasn't an example. I wasn't looking for a company in that space, but I met the right founders at the right time and was able to see like how big this opportunity was. And that's also why I was really excited to start this fund, is to go after so many of these large industries or sectors getting disrupted.
For sure. I want to take a quick pause. Hi, friends. While we're deep in the conversation, I've actually got Notion AI meeting notes on. Why? So you can sit back, enjoy the episode, and still walk away with a really crisp recap of every insight and the moment that since we wrap. So Notion AI is literally taking notes for us. Action items, key quotes, next steps, automatically organized in one workplace. If you're a founder or builder moving a million miles an hour, this is your new superpower. And because of you're part of our show's community, Notion is giving us up to 6 months of business plan with Notion AI worth up to 12K for free. Grab it at ntn.so/grayscone. Okay, so back to the conversation. By the way, Steve, like our conversation is being recorded, and then we will do like a quick recap using Notion AI. I'm very excited about this feature, by the way.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I love using Notion. I use it every day for my workflows,
Yeah, I feel
personally
like,
and also for the fund. Yeah.
exactly. I feel like Notion is becoming like just one of the work basic thing that like everyone just have in the background, and then like whether it's like when you're creating content or when you're creating, I guess, like memos for the fund, it
Right.
is very useful.
Yeah. And then the fundraising landscape's changed too, by the way, because,
Mhm.
when I first started in venture, it was mostly like pitch decks, PDFs, but more than ever, founders are writing these really detailed Notion memos, right? 2, 3, 5, even 10 pages, which is really interesting because, it gets the investors up to speed so quickly, before the meeting, and you can have a really, really deep conversation even in the first meeting.
For sure. I'm super excited about that. Okay, so speaking of raising funding, you have closed your fund in within 5 weeks. So in the current climate, it's like very unheard of. Why don't we talk about like what was your strategy on creating your own fund at the beginning, and then how did the, I guess, like fundraising process look like for you?
Yeah, so my dream is always to be an entrepreneur like my parents. And I've been really fortunate to have kind of entrepreneurship
Mhm.
and founder mentality kind of throughout my life personally. So my wife is also a founder of an AI startup.
Mhm.
And so, I've been really, encouraged and motivated, to do this for a long time.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, I actually thought about starting a fund back in 2020 before the pandemic. So this is a long time coming. And, obviously with COVID and all the things that have happened, it was not the best time for me to start a fund. I also didn't have much growing up, so I didn't have a financial safety net from my parents or just personally, and so it wasn't the right time. But I felt like kind of fast forward to today, it just with the incredible support from founders, other VCs, SV Angel, Bain Capital Ventures, Correlation, all my former friends at Twitter, and when you put all that together, it was the perfect time, and it was gave me a lot of the encouragement to start my own thing. And Yeah, I would say I don't know if there was like one kind of factor or anything that kind of drove this. Like anything in life, you have to be lucky and you have to be at the right place at the right time, certainly. But um, yeah, I would say it was really like the mentorship and the advice that I received from other emerging managers. I would say that was key. And so, there's so many people I can like. We can probably talk for the next hour, but I'll give you an example. Nakul from Audacious Ventures, who was a former partner at Lightspeed. Audacious is in Fund Two. Emerging manager and fund I look up to. Nakul was gracious enough to give me a lot of advice on what it was like to raise Audacious Fund One. What is it like to run your own venture capital firm? How do you make decisions? How do you work with LPs? He didn't have to do any of that, but he spent a lot of time coaching and mentoring me, the phone calls, the coffee chats, and then he also introduced me to two of my largest LPs, and they were his LPs, and so really opened up his Rolodex to help me succeed. And so there are countless of those examples, right? And you need all that to raise Fund One in this like incredibly tough environment. And then lastly, it's all about the founders, right? As we've mentioned again and again. Can't be here without their hard work and founders letting me be a small part of their journey. And especially for Fund One, LPs, limited partners, do a lot of reference calls because there isn't a track record from the current fund, right? They want to see if the strategy plays out. You haven't had a chance to show it yet, and so a lot. All my LPs called dozens of founders, and founders are busy, so I really appreciated it. But they pick up the phone and kind of explain what it was like to work with me over the years. How do I add value? How do they see 7stars adding value to the greater ecosystem? And so, that was a huge factor too. I think if founders didn't understand it or didn't see the value, then it would have been difficult and probably wouldn't have been able to raise a fund.
I wonder, so like, since like I feel like you are a solo GP, so like every day you are a solo founder yourself. How do you leverage AI into your sourcing, diligencing, or like winning deal process?
Yeah, I would say it's all of the above. Kind of from sourcing, diligencing, winning. I mean, sourcing. There's so many founders today and potential founders. I think with it's just the incredible amount of innovation in AI. It's really easy to be a founder to get started. I would say, right. So I use a lot of different tools, AI tools, to track and prioritize different founders because you can't meet all of them, right? You have to kind of prioritize your time. In terms of workflow, I also Notion, and there's so many tools that I use like ChatGPT. I use a lot of deep research, and that helps me get up to speed, and that also saves the founders time because instead of asking the basic questions about a market or about things that easily researchable, I'm able to use a lot of these AI tools and do the research up front and come in with really specific questions so that the first conversation feels like it's like the third conversation, right? Or the second. And then it also helps with the diligence process as well. Like when I write my own investment memo or when I'm kind of looking at the competitive landscape and getting up to speed so that I can show founders kind of what I've learned, right? And then in terms of management as well, use a lot of tools, and products to kind of manage the portfolio so that I'm spending enough time with all the founders. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Yeah.
Would you, I guess, like, what does your workflow kind of look like at the beginning? So, like, would you say, let's say, when you go on ChatGPT, what would you search for, like, the deep research? Do you search, let's say, how does the manufacturer industry work? Or, like, what would the question kind of, like, be looking like? Or, for example, how robotics company make money? Like, what are the things that you would be searching? And then the other part is, like, from, like, the sourcing perspective, like, how do you kind of like leverage AI in terms of like, finding the new candidate? Obviously, there's a lot of people on our show mentioned that they would build some sort of like CRM system that like if someone is like, a SpaceX engineer and then turns stealth and then they will like track them or like use harmonic or something. So like how would you leverage like AI to source? And when you're researching, I guess like what kind of prompt are you or like what kind of answer are you looking for to kind of make yourself more informed about a company?
Yeah, in terms of the prompt, it depends on the sector.
Mhm,
And so, I've been fortunate to be an investor, venture capitalist for the last 9 years. And so there are some areas that, I've invested in or I have some insight about.
mhm,
And so for those sectors, I'm already going in with a bit of a prepared mind, but, you also have to be very open-minded because sectors change and there's different market shifts that you're not going to be aware of, right? The founders are going to know the best, and so for those kind of instances, I go in with a couple questions, just that are a little bit more specific to understand how the market has changed since I've last invested in a similar company or have looked at the space,
mhm,
and then from there, based on the answers that I get. I do like further research, right? And then I'll start talking to some people, just to have as I mentioned, a prepared mind. Um, so it kind of sometimes I kind of wander into a rabbit hole, right, and just go really deep on a specific area because maybe that's like the insight that the founder has, and I need to really understand how they're going to attract the best talent, how they're going to win, how they're going to uh, you know uh, build a company, right, when it's going to be really hard. And so that's what I would do for that example. And then I think for like areas that I just don't have any expertise or kind of learning for the first time, I start with the very basics, right? Is this a big market opportunity? How fast is it going to grow? What are some of the examples of companies in the past that have worked well, maybe haven't worked as well? What were the types of industries does it impact, right? So it takes a bit more time, but I've been really surprised by how great these tools have been. It just gets better and better.
mhm,
And the great thing is also for my productivity, I'm able to meet more companies uh, because now I can get up to speed, even within that day, right? And so if it's a really fast moving company and a financing, I can go tell the founder, hey, like why can't we meet later today, right, or this afternoon, or why don't we just start with a quick phone call, and then go from there. So that's been great. And then in terms of your second question, tools, how am I using AI to kind of manage all this? Yeah, I would say it's kind of all the above. Have used Harmonic in the past. The CRM and the tools kind of that I use, things off the shelf, and
mhm,
kind of sometimes I look at kind of lists of companies or people and start kind of tagging or prioritizing them. When you
mhm,
put all that together, I don't think anyone's really figured out uh,
mhm,
like a method that works. When I talk to my peers in the industry, feels like everybody's kind of using a lot of different tools because you just never know where the best founders and the next founder is going to come from.
mhm,
And a lot of times, like you can do all this AI work, but at the
mhm,
end of the day, that person might not show up on a screen, right? Because it's back to what we were saying before. Sometimes founders are very, younger in their careers or first time founders, right? So it's not like you can say, hey, this person's had success here. Maybe they're coming straight out of college, right? Or maybe there's, founders getting younger. They're, coming, dropping out of high school. So there's not much, right? It's not like they have a LinkedIn profile or extensive resume. And so for those kind of cases, like sometimes like you're also looking at kind of different alumni groups or asking other people in their age cohort or in their group of, hey, like who are other people that I should be meeting, right?
mhm,
And so sometimes I've been fortunate where there's like a bunch of people that I've met, and there have been a handful I've invested in. And then from those folks, from those founders, they've said, hey, here's another founder you should meet who is very similar to me or similar to how you're thinking about it. And I don't, if I go backtrack, I don't think I could have found them right with any of these tools, because a lot of these companies are built in stealth now. So yeah, so I guess a little bit of both, but that's also what makes this job fun and challenging at the same time, is that you always have to be open-minded, and you never know where the next company comes from.
for sure. I wonder, so how do you filter out like the inbound deals? Another question I wanted to ask for the founders, by the way, Lucky has a question. What is like three major criteria you're looking now? I want to maybe pivot the question to a little bit more towards like, if I'm a founder today, I'm come to pitch you for
Yeah.
my, I don't know, AI HR startup, like how do you process the information that we give you? Like for example, let's say when our conversation, like what kind of points do I have to hit to make you feel interested? And what does your memo kind of look like for yourself? Like, do you emphasize on like competitor analysis? Do you emphasize on like, how do you even calculate the TAM? And like, what should I involve? Like, what should I include in my pitch that make you feel like it's, potentially investable? And then second question would be like, what does the diligence process look like for you? Let's say when you're back channeling, like to call these other people in the industry, let's say how many people do you have to call to make yourself feel comfortable? And I guess who do you call to? Like, I'm sure maybe there's like some potential customers and stuff like that, but like some of the company are like so early that like there's no customer. And how do you kind of digest the kind of information I give you?
Yeah, so I would say in terms of the first point, whether it's a cold email or the first meeting, it's back to the founder background. I think sometimes people, there are some people who might ask you what the market is or how much revenue you're going to generate or, the deal terms. Those are all important things, and I talk about towards the end of the meeting. But the very first thing is I really want to understand the founder's background. Like, where are they from? Where did they grow up? What were they like when they were a kid, right? Why are they here? Why are they so passionate about this space? So I start to, I want to unpack that and really understand and figure out, is this going to be your life's work,
Mhm.
right? Is this something that you're really passionate about, or are you just doing it just because it sounds good for the moment, right? And I think that all touches to like the founder resilience, right? And there's just kind of meeting thousands and thousands of founders over the years and being part of a lot of different companies. There's certain questions that I ask now and to understand like the true motivations. And so yeah, I would say that's like very important. And let's say in a cold email or kind of when I meet somebody I don't know, it's very simple as like a one or two liner, right? I built this company in this space, or was part of this club or club on campus, right? Where we went from zero to X, right, without any funding, and we bootstrapped it ourselves, or things like that, right? Every story is different. Every person has a different kind of upbringing, and so things like that. Or hey, I was an immigrant founder. I came here, didn't really know how to speak English or have any connection to anyone, kind of like my parents, and figured it out, right? Was able to work at this big company and become a leader here. And so it comes in a lot of different ways, right? I heard, I spoke to, a couple weeks ago, I spoke to a high schooler who is going to, a well-known university, who wants to start a company, right? Thinking about not going to college. And one of the things this person said was, talked about this kind of side business that they were building on the side that grew to like hundreds of companies, customers, right?
Mhm.
That's pretty impressive to do, right? When you're 17 years old and you have to study for the SATs and you have all this other stuff in your life, right? So it just comes in a lot of different ways. So yeah, so that's the first part of your question.
How do you, I guess, like write the memo? I guess like what would be actually on your checklist
Yeah.
to like move forward with a deal? Besides, like obviously the founder have grit or like have some chips in their shoulder,
Sure. Yeah.
and then there's like
Yeah.
a lot of things that in the past they've done that's kind of like impressive.
Of course.
Because like how do you diligence if the idea is actually gonna like come through as like a company format?
Yeah, well, I try to talk to different companies to understand the market. It's very important to get the buyer's perspective, right? That the customer end point of view. And so, even if it's a company where the market is still being formed today, as you mentioned, it's hard to really understand how big the market is going to be, right? And when you look at some of the biggest companies of our lifetimes, if you did like the TAM analysis, it was a very small market, but then it grew and expanded and created new categories, right? So that's what I'm trying to understand for a lot of these companies that and founders I work with. And so I talk to companies and just say, hey, if this company built X, Y, Z, is it a nice to have? Is it a must have? Is it something you would pay for? If you were to pay for it, how much would you pay, right? Is it something that you would use because it's free, or so you start kind of digging in a little bit there and understanding. And you can do it without mentioning any trade secrets or any confidential info from the companies, right? And then and then that's also really interesting for me too, because then I start learning about new areas or new sectors or subsectors that I could invest in as well. So some of the companies I invest in over years, through that process, I learned, oh, actually, there's a bigger problem, right? This company is now telling me that they would want the first thing they would want to buy is like this kind of product, right?
Mhm.
And so that now that gives me like a prepared, point of view, and then I'm able to kind of develop some more thoughts there.
Mhm.
So it kind of works in both ways, right? For the current company I'm looking at, and also like future sectors. Um, so that's kind of how I do research. It's never going to be perfect. There are times where I've invested in companies where there's 5 competitors, right? They're
Mhm.
all at similar stages, and it's really hard to see differentiation. But it goes back to the founder. The founder might have a point of view, or they have this one insight that's different, right? That
Mhm.
believe in, right? And you can validate and you can dream with the founder. And that's what gets me excited. And so sometimes I'll invest there, right?
Mhm.
Because it just goes back to like, the founders and the teams and how they can execute.
Mhm. I wonder, another question for you is like, uh, I have like lately, so like on our show, we have like people that are building very similar ideas. Like one would be like a senior exec from XYZ company, and then the other would be like a new grad, but like went through like YZ or something, building something.
Yeah.
Or like actually these two product are like the same. So like you can't tell if there's no label. So like, but like maybe like I guess like how do you think about um picking when it comes to there's like similar product, two different background people building
Yeah.
with the second time founder slash I guess like the exec build a better product versus like the YC founder who are just like fresh out of school, build a better product. How do you think about it?
Yeah, I would say it's tough, right? That's why I think as venture capitalists, we get it wrong a lot, because sometimes you might have the wrong read, or you know kind of you might not understand kind of the founder motivations, or the sector correctly. So you might not invest in both, right? In cases, but I would say it's probably two main factors here. One is, it's back to the founder background, um, and there's pros and cons to everything in life, right? So there are repeat entrepreneurs and successful entrepreneurs where they have a chip on their shoulder, right? They were like, hey, the first company should have been even bigger, and I'm going to shoot for the moon right here, right? This is going to be even bigger, and this is what's going to motivate me, and I have everything ready to go, and I have my old team coming back, and all this kind of stuff, right? That's like a really interesting ingredient, right? I've also, met repeat entrepreneurs where they're kind of like, hey, like I don't really love this space, but I don't know what I want to do, right? I mean, people aren't going to explicitly say that, but you can start figuring that out, right? That's not going to be a founder who's going to be resilient, who's going to, break walls and overcome a lot of obstacles, right? And so, that's kind of like what I look for in kind of that personality, or that profile. And then when you look at like the first time founder, young, hungry, um, a lot of times like you're looking to see like, are they fast learners, right? Can they get great people around them? Even starts with like the advisors too, right? Can they have, some of the most prominent executives and operators believe in them, whether they're a small angel investor or they're helping, coach them, right? So you kind of start seeing those things, right? And then you also see other teams where they're not open to feedback, right? They're very rigid in their ways, and they don't really listen to customer feedback. So probably not going to be a company that's going to scale really quickly. And so those are kind of the things I look for those kind of personas. And so there's going to be some sectors where the more experienced team, maybe they're coming back and they have a new insight, and maybe AI is going to, really help turbocharge like what they try to do kind of in the version 1.0, right? Maybe there's other sectors where it's that younger team, right? Fresh, not as jaded, they have a new point of view. Maybe this sector, that the problem was the technology, and the technology part is here, right? It's not a go-to-market issue. And so they're the winner. So I would say, when you look at those kinds of groups and teams and personas, it just depends on the sector, and then also the individual kind of motivations and how they want to build things out.
Mm, for sure. I want to be mindful of the time, so maybe we'll wrap with a quick 1 minute fire round for you.
Okay.
What's your favorite book?
My favorite book is Shoe Dog. It talks about Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, and just all the ups and downs and how how courageous it is to start a company. So it's one of my favorite books.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Founder, VC, or people I know, people I don't know.
It's your party.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would probably. So I love sports. Huge sports fan. I'm a huge LA Dodgers and Lakers fan, and so I would probably invite like one Dodgers player, one Lakers player. So probably Shohei Ohtani, current Dodger star right now, and then LeBron James from the Lakers.
Love that. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would what? Say that again.
Wait, sorry, who made the biggest impact in your career? So I'm so sorry. Oh my god.
Yeah, that's a great question. So many people over the years. I mean, I think it just starts with my parents. There's, as I said, their sacrifices, their journey to coming to America, just everything that they've done for me to be successful. That's a huge part. And I would also say my wife as well, right? She's, Yoon's a founder of a company called July AI, and she was a founder first in our household. So seeing kind of, all the ups and all the downs and how hard it is to start a company and kind of her success, that was also encouraging for me too, to see, hey, this can work for me too.
Love that. Where can we find you outside of work?
Yeah, I love kind of everything live. So live music, sporting events. A little bit hard to do that. Our daughter is 18 months old. So now the outside stuff is parks and playgrounds and swimming pools. So yeah, you probably find me in those places now. Yeah.
Love that. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on the show today. I know this is your first podcast. It was such a great one. It was such a great one. Thank you. Also, hi, Charles. Want to say hi to
Thank
our
you.
audience.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it was such a pleasure.
Thank you. Let me quickly answer.